Hey, good afternoon, Jess.
Hi, how are ya?
Good. How you doing?
Good.
Well, thanks for hopping on. You've been one of our longest tenured physical therapists at PTDU. And what we're going to do today is just kind of talk about your experience, how you been, why you like PTDU, what kind of brought you on initially. And we're going to cover a lot of those topics today.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right. So walk me through your initial process for coming on to PTDU. How you found out about us, what maybe piqued your interest, and why you ended up kind of making the leap and deciding to come on board.
Sure. So I've been a physical therapist now for like 6 years, working, the 9 to 5 ALF lifestyle for a long time. And I started to get a little bit bored with it and wanted to do something new. And I believe you guys reached out via text message initially. So I gave you a call and you kind of explained, the freedom of kind of scheduling your own patients, finding your own patients, taking on as much or as little as you want. And it really was something that kind of fit what I was already doing and something that I was looking for. So, yeah, I think we went from there.
Yeah, it is a bit daunting, and PTDU is not your typical physical therapy company. So, hearing for the first time that, hey, you're going to have to, bring on your own patients. But with that, they are your patients and you're going to build, your future going forward. What was the thought process going in your head? Were you a little bit worried? Were you nervous? Or, talk to me about, that first conversation of, oh, this isn't my typical physical therapy company that I already work for.
Yeah, I was definitely nervous when you kind of mentioned like it's kind of up to me to find, who I'm going to be seeing and kind of keep up that caseload. But I talked more with you and I worked with you guys, you did a lot of one-on-one work with me, just helping me find different avenues of marketing myself to clinicians or in my community, it kind of became less intimidating. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
And then, kind of once I got my first patient, that was when things really
yeah.
started rolling. The first one, like you said so many times, was definitely the hardest, but after that, it kind of got easier. And then the nice part is, once you see somebody, they're kind of in you know, your phone book for, you
Correct.
know, the future. And then you kind of start, having a group of patients that you can call back and, visit later on in the year.
You're right. As we know, as physical therapists, patients are very loyal to you, and they care much more about the therapist that they're working with as opposed to, the company that they're with. And, the only way to, guarantee your work going forward, guarantee your rates, guarantee, you have the patients that you want to see, whether it's in your local dense community, so you don't have to drive everywhere, is to start to go out there and be your own marketer. Going back to, you brought up the conversations that you had with us. I could tell you about how much you've grown as a therapist and being able to talk and get out there, but talk to everyone else about, the conversations, the trainings that you had with us, on the phone, the weekly calls to try and figure out your pitch and everything. Go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, most physical therapists kind of, work for companies that, um, they really don't have to do much. The people are on their schedule, they show up, they see them. So I didn't really have a lot of, on different types of conversations, whether it be from taking someone from part A to part B or just marketing myself in general of what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what are, terms and phrases to use when you're talking to patients. That one was a big one for me. So once I kind of talked with you guys for a few weeks and you gave me some ideas of things to say or, kind of just looking deep in myself and, thinking about what am I good at? What's like my niche? What population do I want to work with instead of, you know, you show up to work, you have to see who's on your schedule. This was kind of like really like cool to think about like who do I actually want to see and like what are my passions in physical therapy instead of just having to see, your list of people every day that you're
Yeah.
given.
And you said you've been a physical therapist for about 6 years now. I've been about 7 or 8 years. We have other therapists who've been on 20, 30 years. And the topic that comes up the most, which is unfortunate, is burnout in our profession or therapists feel like they're mercenaries or evaluation junkies. A lot of companies use PTAs. So talk with me too about, I don't want to call it, work life happiness, but the joy of being a PT, getting to follow all your own patients that are yours, that whole process of, yeah, I actually am enjoying what I'm doing again, as opposed to maybe the monotony of an ALF or a home health agency or some of the other settings.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is just following somebody from evaluation discharge. A lot of times PTs don't get to do that. We're just doing evals, reevals, oases, just the, monotonous, long paperwork, and we kind of lose focus of like the patient and their actual journey to get better. And here you really get to follow them and see them from day one to discharge. And it was, you get to build relationships that you don't necessarily get to build when you just eval people and discharge them. So it's been really great. You go to their houses, help them, modify their homes, you meet their families. So it's really more personal than just an outpatient clinic or an assisted living facility. Um,
Yeah, and I know you have done Part A work before in the past for home health agencies. What's the biggest difference between, working for a home health care agency and then, working for yourself as a Part B provider?
uh, Two of the biggest things for me is the distance I have to travel to see patients. Here it's great because you only take who you want to take. People usually you're marketing yourself to the community around you, so you don't have to travel as far as, some home health companies would have you go. And then documentation is a big one. So you're not doing oases, you're not doing long evals. It's really quick, easy, and just a lot less of a headache than most companies.
Awesome, you're right. Yep. And how is it, since being on PTD, how is the documentation support and training?
The support and training has been the best I've seen. I've worked for multiple home health companies, multiple Part B companies, and everybody's super friendly, super quick to respond, and just, on their A games at all times. They really do all the back end work. So they get everything in the patient's chart. You just click on it, their phone number is there, address is there, any sort of documentation that they send in is there. So it's really easy to schedule out all your visits. I mean, it couldn't be easier. And then just the training as well, that the training was awesome. Just super simplistic, to the point, nothing that you don't need to hear pretty much.
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah.
this is what we're doing, this is how you do it. And then my favorite part of this whole experience was the videos that I was sent. So after my training, I got like a Google Doc of training videos, which I really appreciate because
Awesome.
obviously nobody knows how to do an eval when they're shown one time. And you don't, a lot of times we feel bad going back and asking all these questions. How do I do this? So the videos, I mean, you just click on them when you're going through the first couple evals, watch along with them, and you're done. So it was great.
Awesome. Good, good. How long would it say if you is it take you to do your notes, compared to Part A or the ALF versus working with PTDU and the EMR that you do there?
I would say a typical eval, with PT to you would probably take 10 to 12 minutes, maybe less than that. And any sort of home health eval that I do is at least 25, 30
Yeah.
minutes. And, sometimes they send it back, so you have to fix stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this is just, so easy. A lot of, drop down menus that you can use so you don't have to fill every single area out. So it's really, really user friendly.
Good. And, a lot of therapists that work for multiple different people or work for a few different, companies, they get scared of the fact they've always wanted to maybe take the leap or they don't want to take the risk of maybe trying to go out and do stuff on your own. With PTDU, you can build it. You're finding that out too, where you don't have to take the massive jump or the massive risk that it comes with starting your own company. See, one, talk about, how you've grown, maybe both personally and as a therapist. And then two, what you envision the future looking like for yourself with PTD.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a little scary at first. I feel like I definitely had to step out of my comfort zone, just talking to people that I usually don't talk to, whether it be, practitioners or, I mean, my first patient actually came from an app called Nextdoor where I just decided like, "Hey, let me put this on this app. I'll introduce myself. I'll write a little blurb of, about physical therapy, how we can help people in my local community, whether it be, the elderly with falls, balance, modifications." And I kind of just typed something quick up and sent it out just to see, what happened. And I think somebody called me like a couple days later. So that's something normally wouldn't do. I think it took me like 3, 4 weeks to even think
Yeah.
of that because I was just kind of off to a little bit of a slow start.
Yeah.
But I've definitely gotten more creative. I feel like I've gotten a lot more talking to people, whether it be the patients or their families.
Yeah, and
And
those are life
then,
skills. Those are
yeah,
things that you don't learn unless you take the jump, and that are now
right.
going to serve you one for the rest of your life and the rest of your career as a physical therapist. And having that confidence, that ability to take that work for yourself and be the type of person who can go out there and say, "Hey, these are my services I provide. This is what I do, and this is why you should work with me." Yeah.
And yeah, you get to find people that you wanna work with and that you kind of get that joy of being a physical therapist back again. You get to be creative and do treatments that you wanna do, and, yeah, there's just less pressure. It's more a
Mhm.
relaxed setting, and, you know, if you start and you can slowly build up, there's no pressure, there's no productivity standards, nothing like that.
Yeah. Now, a lot of therapists, that may be on the fence. They'd say, "Hey, well, I don't know if I can fit all this in. I'm working. I'm never going to have time to ever, go out there and do stuff for myself." What would you say to that person? What does your maybe week to week look like? And how do you, I guess, fit in what you need to do to try and drive some patients to yourself among, being a therapist and treating and seeing patients?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's scary. We all have bills to pay and you don't want to leave a stable situation to kind
Hmm.
of take a risk. But that's the nice part about this is you don't have to just, quit your job and jump into it. You can try it out, see what happens. I was lucky because my full-time job schedule was on the more flexible end. Yeah, it just worked out. But I think once you get started and see how easy it is and how much more relaxed the scheduling is and how much time you're going to save on documentation, and you really start to, a light bulb goes off like, I really want to keep finding patients here and keep treating patients to save myself time on the weekends when you're documenting for, 4 or 5 hours at
Yeah.
night. It gives you more control over your life because you're not spending hours unpaid, doing documentation and other stuff.
Yeah, and, like we've talked about too, the quicker you get into it, the quicker those patients start coming back to you. Medicare Part B, they get their benefits every year and they want to return back. And that's where you get those same patients, as coming back to you for a second episode later in the year, the next year, and you can keep building on from there. So going based off that, what do you envision, what it looks like for you in a year? And what would you say to some physical therapists maybe on the fence of, trying to make that leap?
Well, in a year from now, I hope I can double my caseload. That would be my goal. I think you kind of set a goal for me early on, like 2 new patients a month. And that's kind of, I kind of took that and really tried to meet that. It's good to set goals for yourself because I feel
Mhm.
like to begin, it's hard to, you don't know what to expect. So I think next year I would like to really retain the patients that I've already treated this year and then maybe double that number.
Great.
But yeah, no, I would like to have more patients with PTDU so I can kind of scale back my other work so I can, kind of enjoy
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
be
it
less
makes you
burnt
enjoy being a
out,
PT again. Yes.
enjoy therapy again. So
Awesome, and then they say, what would you say to that person, wait and take the jump or, considering having maybe had a call with us and they're saying, "Hey, I'm not sure if I wanna take that next step."
Yeah, I would say just try it. I mean, you really don't have anything to lose. There aren't any cons, only
Yeah,
pros that I
yeah,
have, experienced so far, and you're gonna regret it if you don't try it. I mean, it is kind of, a different type of company, so I think that's what scares people the most, but I think, moving forward, especially for healthcare and PTs, we gotta think of more unconventional ways of doing things. It can't just be always the outpatient clinics or the ALFs. We
yeah.
really have to become independent as therapists and, put
You're right.
value in ourselves instead of a company.
The future, unfortunately, is very, very bleak for the regular physical therapist in the state of Florida, or even maybe even across the country. Especially if you're in the insurance space, reimbursement rates will go down, and then marketing costs will always go up. So that leaves PTs beholden to the company that they work for, and that leaves a lot of companies looking to, cheap that labor out to PTAs. You know,
Right.
so the unfortunate reality of the situation is if you don't take that leap and start, working to generate your own book of patients, you then become beholden to whatever company it is that you work for, whether that's actually a decrease in pay, the more experience you get, which, is not something that we ever want, but it is the reality of it. Number two, you're stuck doing all the things that you hate about the job, which is, evals, driving long distances. If you're an outpatient therapist, you're doing 4 patients in an hour because that is the reality as things keep progressing, unless you kind of take the jump and start along the route of getting your own patients. And
Yeah.
you got a head start on it. We're excited to see your growth, and we can't wait to keep helping you build.
Yeah, it's been awesome so far. I can't thank you and everybody,
You're
the
welcome.
staff enough. It's been awesome. And I really look forward to growing more next year and, keep moving
Perfect. Let's
forward
do it.
forward with you guys. Yeah,
All right, Jess. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay.